Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shack News live show from E3 2018, Day 2. I'm your host, Long Reads editor David L. Craddock, and I am joined by my guests today from Mobius DIgital. I've got Alex and Wesley here to talk about Outer Wilds. But before we do that, we're going to throw you a gameplay trailer. This is really exciting because this is the gameplay reveal for your game. So we'll take a look at that, and then I will be back to ask them questions. Right, and I'm back with Alex and Wesley from Mobius DIgital. And guys, tell me a little bit about what we just saw. Since this is the gameplay reveal, I wonder if you could kind of define what is Outer Wilds.
Yeah, absolutely. So Outer Wilds is an open world mystery where you explore a solar system that is caught in a 20-minute time loop.
A 20-minute time loop?
20-minute time loop.
Okay.
So every 20 minutes, you go back in time, and you always wake up at the same point. If you die, you go back in time sooner. And so over the course of multiple loops, you have to go out and explore the different planets in the solar system.
Interesting. And how do things change kind of within that 20-minute time loop?
Yeah, so one of the big reasons we have the time loop is because a big theme of Outer Wilds is these large-scale natural systems dynamically changing over time, and things changing in ways that you can't control as you're exploring. So one example is we have a planet that over the course of 20 minutes, it gets bombarded by molten meteors from its volcanic moon. And as it gets bombarded, pieces of the planet start to fall away into the center. The planet is hollow, there's a black hole at the center. Wow. Sorry, there's a lot of context, but and so as you're exploring this place, you know, you're getting bombarded and things are falling away, and it sort of creates this feeling that you're exploring a world that is moving and changing and living whether you're there or not. Mm-hmm. And that's just really important to the feel we're going for.
Excellent, excellent. So Wesley, tell me a little bit about what you do on this game.
So I'm the art director. So basically it's my job to take Alex's ideas and make them presentable. But one of the big things that makes Outer Wilds unique is that it's a handcrafted solar system. So as opposed to a lot of games that go for here's a bunch of different things in space infinitely, our game is very much about these small defined environments. Small. They're still planets, so they're pretty big. But we go and we place every rock by hand. So it has very specific level design, which is important to make it feel like you're out hiking or backpacking, which is one of the main themes of the game.
Interesting. So it's an open world mystery. There seems like two genre words I have not seen combined.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
We were hunting for how are we going to describe this game?
Right.
And that seemed like we went through a lot of options, and that really is the most accurate, I think, because once you lift off from the starting area, you're free to go anywhere in the solar system. And the solar system is 6 planets, 3 moons, 3 space stations, and a comet. And so it's very open. We don't tell you where to go. In fact, one of the big things we were trying to do with this game is to see, can we make an exploration game where players are motivated to explore purely out of their own curiosity? And so, of course, it's on us as the developers to then make a world that players can be curious about. And we do a lot of things to try to seed curiosity throughout the game. And one of the things we ended up with was the mystery angle, because mystery is a great way to get people curious.
Absolutely.
And so what the game really is this very nonlinear exploratory thing where you're going to go to a planet and you're going to land somewhere and you're going to find probably something we've put on the surface. Mm-hmm. And anything you find is going to kind of give you a clue that will either lead you deeper on that planet or will send you somewhere else in the solar system. And as you travel around, you gain more clues that tell you how to reach secret places you wouldn't be able to find otherwise. And you're also delving into the narrative of the world. On every planet, there are ruins left by an ancient, long-dead race. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the game, one of the mysteries is why did they come to this solar system and what happened to them? And as you explore and kind of put the pieces together, that all starts to come together.
Interesting. So what is the balance between elements being handcrafted, but also these events such as like the meteor showers and things like that, do those kind of scatter the hand-placed elements, or is everything very kind of calculated so that even though things might seem capricious and random, you know exactly what is happening behind the scenes?
Like Wesley was saying, in fact, do you want to?
Yeah. So we handcraft every environment, but the game, one of the like fundamentals of the game for making it feel the way it does is that it's all physically simulated. So like the planets are actually in orbit, everything's actually moving at high speeds at all times. So like when you take off in your ship, you can just get out and like your ship will fall back down to the planet because it's still stuck in the gravity. So a lot of these systems, like the meteors falling, are physical objects. So it's sort of like procedural destruction of these handcrafted environments. So it's slightly different every time, but we make sure that the environments themselves are like interesting and unique. So as you explore in different places, you know, whether or not you go to a chunk before it falls or after it falls to the black hole, you can explore it in different ways because one's in gravity whereas one's in zero-G.
Very cool.
We've built a whole bunch of, you know, completely handcrafted environments and pieces of design and narrative and story, and the art team placed just so many rocks. And we just sort of like wind up the physics and then let it go at the beginning. And after that point, it's, you know, very obviously the player can like trigger certain things, but it's pretty much just the system, the natural systems of each planet and the gravitational forces and all of that just kind of doing their thing, which leads to a lot of kind of fun emergent situations.
Now, I'd like to talk about the genesis of this idea since, you know, as players, we're seeing this game for the first time. Alex is the designer and the director. What was the first seed for the game that became Outer Wilds?
So the game started originally 6 years ago as my thesis project at grad school. And it came together out of a bunch of kind of unrelated prototypes. One of the earliest ones, if you've played the game, there's a little model rocket you can fly in the village that kind of teaches you how to fly the ship and also makes you a little afraid to fly the big ship because usually people, you know, just crash the hell out of the small one. So there was a prototype of that. There was a prototype of like the quantum stuff, and we started trying to figure out what was the common thread through all of these. And it kind of boiled down to we wanted to make something that captured the spirit of real-world space exploration, which meant making a game where the reason to explore is to learn more about the world you're in, that sense of curiosity. And then the second part of that was we really wanted to try making an exploration game where the world you're exploring is dynamically changing over time. So it's just as much about when you're exploring as where you're exploring. And from those two things, you know, everything just kind of like eventually came out, and a lot of the old prototypes got roped back in. And then 3 years ago, we started working on it full-time at Mobius, our current studio.
Excellent. So were you, Wesley, involved in the beginning? Are you two friends from way back?
I actually started when it started at Mobius. We sort of had mutual connections, and I heard about the project, and it sounded like exactly my thing because I actually grew up at like a summer camp. So, you know, I grew up in the woods and, you know, was really into space and all these things. And so when I heard about this game and, you know, played the early version, it was like, oh, it's a game about exploring space, but also like hiking and backpacking. This is something I want to work on. I pretty much have to.
So tell me a little bit about the art style that you set, because when I looked at this, I saw a little bit of No Man's Sky, a little bit of Astroneer, but it also has its very own unique look and flavor to it.
Yeah, so we were heavily inspired by national parks. We wanted the game to be a space exploration game, but we also wanted it to feel like you're exploring a natural environment. So we kind of shied away from like, you know, crazy sci-fi designs for everything. And we wanted it to feel weird, but in like a familiar setting. So we went to like national parks of the U.S., as well as specifically the style of national park posters from like the 60s, 70s era when NASA was huge. And so it's that sort of combination of like backpacking meets NASA that defined our style. It was also heavily defined by the constraints because everything is physically simulated, moving around really fast. Performance is difficult, so making it so that, you know, the simplified art assets we can render really fast so that it's still fun to play. The national park posters have that graphic style where they're very simplified, and so we use that in like the background assets like the terrain, and then things that we want players to notice more like architecture we make more detailed.
Excellent. So Alex, do you weigh in on the art direction of the game, or do you kind of let artists like Wesley kind of do his thing?
Yeah, Wesley and I work together to kind of define what the look and feel should be. Obviously, Wesley, as an artist, is just way better at like actually putting words to things. But
right.
You know, sometimes I'll be like, I really want this to feel a certain way, but I'm not really sure like how we're going to do that. And then Wesley will go off and come up with some sort of like how we actually do that.
Yeah, we have a very small team, so it's really collaborative. I'll give design feedback. Everyone will give art feedback. We have like 12 people in our office, so everyone kind of is involved in everything, even though we all have our own specializations.
Excellent. So was the time loop concept involved from the very beginning?
Pretty close, yeah. The reason we knew very early on that we would need to reset the clock because we wanted to do things like have planets fall apart. And it was really just a question of, is that reset button going to be part of the story, or is it going to be more like, a roguelike, where at some point you play through it once and that counts as a playthrough, and then it's like a completely new experience. And ultimately we're like, let's make it part of the story. We can probably work it in, and it sounds more interesting. And then that became the backbone of one of the 4 major mysteries in the game.
So this might sound like a very specific question, but I'm interested. How did you dial in on 20 minutes? And are those 20 real-time minutes or in-game minutes?
Well, actually, it's actually 22.
Oh, 22.
Oh, no. We say 20 minutes because it's easy to remember.
Oh, but it's really 22.
It's actually 22.
Oh, okay.
And actually, the old version that we released years ago, because there was an alpha that was released before Wesley and the art team stepped in, so it looks kind of garbage now. Oh. But you can see the bones of what it became. And that one, I believe, was 18 minutes. So we added 4 minutes for the final version, in large part because we went in and we fleshed out the level designs and just the visuals to the point where it just takes more time to navigate the environments than it did. And so there are a few places where we're like, oh no, people are like running up on the clock here. We should probably just, let's just extend it a bit.
So is this the sort of game where if I miss an experience and the time loop resets, can I never experience it again?
No, I mean, because it's a time loop, you can go right back.
Right.
And we don't rely too heavily on like hitting super scheduled events. You play a game like there's your Majora's Mask, which is very schedule driven, right? And you're like, I've got to talk to this person at 2 o'clock and then talk to this person at 5 o'clock and go
follow that guy into the milk bar.
Yeah, exactly.
And
because the game is more about these big environments you're exploring and investigate, it's more space archaeology. Okay. We have way less of that kind of scheduled stuff. There are still a few things that are, be at this place at this time, but it's way more about how the environments are gradually changing and less about hitting certain times a day, so to speak.
Sure.
The looping aspect comes in a lot more in the sense of mastery. Where it's kind of like Groundhog Day, where like because he lives through the same scenario so many times, he has a perfect understanding of everything that's going on. And since like curiosity and knowledge is one of the main themes of the game, it's very much about the player getting that level of mastery and navigating the environment, being like, all right, I know that if I go here at this time, I can do this, and then plan out my route over here, and it creates this fun sense of like planning your expeditions.
Very cool. So what is the divide between spending time in a ship and also, as you said, Wes, I think you put it, getting out and kind of backpacking, hiking? On foot.
Yeah, it's actually, I would say mostly on foot. Once you get the hang on the
ship. The ship is a lot of fun. We goof off a lot in the ship because you can do some wacky physics things in it. But the ship is sort of like your mobile base. Okay. It's like you'll take it to a planet, you'll land somewhere, get it out and explore, and then get back in and maybe fly to the other side of the planet.
When you're outside of your ship, you have limited fuel and oxygen. And there are a few ways to refill those outside of your ship, but your ship still feels like you don't want to leave your ship too far away.
Right.
Because it is very much kind of your home base. And it's also home to your ship log, which is where all of the information, all of the knowledge you've uncovered is stored between loops.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, one thing we were kind of talking before we went live here is you said people ask you, well, is this game No Man's Sky? And it sounds like you've touched on a lot of features that distinguish it, but I'd like to hear more about that because space exploration is becoming this bigger genre. So what are some of the other major ways that you feel Outer Wilds really kind of sets itself apart?
Yeah, absolutely. We do get that a lot, which is completely understandable. I think that we're like different parts of a spectrum of that kind of space exploration game, right?
Sure.
Where, No Man's Sky is certainly more exploratory than like Elite, where it's, very combat focused. Obviously, Outer Wilds has no combat whatsoever. And Outer Wilds, instead of having infinite procedural worlds, we have 6 planets, 3 moons, 3 space stations, and a comet.
Right.
And everything was placed by our artists and designed by our designers. And there's a very specific story. I mean, it's very open in the sense that you can start anywhere you want, but there's a very definite story that's being uncovered by the player as they explore. So just what you do in the game is very different.
Yeah, it's also sort of like it's the opposite aspect of exploration, whereas a lot of space games are about like going out. It's like, hey, there's this infinite thing you can go explore. Outer Wilds is more about going in and achieving like a greater understanding of the depth of the environment. So a lot of the planets have layers. Like, for example, there's these two sand planets that orbit each other, and sand drains off of one and fills up the other one over time. So as you go, you can discover like more hidden cave systems and ruins that get uncovered. And so a lot of it's about like understanding the depth of each environment and finding all the hidden nooks and crannies that are in there.
I really like the sound of that planet. Almost, I was picturing like an hourglass in my head where it kind of shifts to one side or the other.
They're called the Hourglass Twins, actually.
Pretty on the nose.
Pretty on the nose there. So what are some of the things that go into creating environment? Because one thing I really like about this game is instead of just like, well, we've procedurally generated 1 billion planets and they kind of have, they have different rocks, but big deal. But it sounds like yours are very, very specific. So what goes into creating them and putting these pieces together?
Yeah, I'm going to let Wesley answer most of this because it kind of boils down to each planet just has a different art pipeline entirely. Because, and they're, some of them are on spheres, some of them are weird interdimensional space plants.
Yeah, it's the kind of game where like we explored a lot of different solutions to like save time and do typical video game things of reusing assets, but in the end it ended up just being a lot of like elbow grease and hard work because each planet has completely unique gameplay systems. It has unique physics. Alex and Lauren, our other designer, are very specific with level design, so it's like, oh, you moved this 1 degree, we need it back that way. We're like, okay, well, I guess we'll make hard edges on cliffs and things like that.
Right.
So it became a lot about working within those constraints. So each planet we had to basically just create a new art pipeline for, new assets that are all custom pieces so that we can make certain things. And we reuse where we can, but we ended up with just a whole bunch of really unique content because we had to.
Well, what are some features you're looking forward to players really exploring and seeing their reactions to?
That's a good question. We've run a lot of playtests, so we've seen players do some crazy stuff, and it's always fun, watching them kind of dip their toes into the world, and it is very much a game that kind of throws you in the deep end and then asks you to make sense of it.
Right.
I'm really excited to see people really start to piece together the underlying mysteries and the narrative, especially some of the things that aren't required to finish the game, so to speak. There's a lot of depth to the world. We've tried really hard to build a world that is internally consistent, where all the story pieces and all the physics things you're encountering, they all connect and they all make sense. And it's really important because our goal is to make a game where any question the player could conceivably have is something they can go find the answer to through exploration.
Excellent. So I'd like to hear more about this narrative. How do you construct a narrative that players are meant to solve, but it also sounds like it's part of this game where maybe I want to wander off the beaten path and kind of tell my own stories through exploration and discovery for a while?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix of those kind of emergent, just player-driven stories of like, oh man, I crashed my ship here and I got out and then I was sucked up by a tornado and then I found a space that, that kind of just...
Yeah.
You can tell that story back to your friends and someone else. I mean, we've watched so many people play it, and people we still get surprised by the things people do. They're just like, oh, you just jumped out of your ship there. That's fine. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then they make it work. We're just like, wow, all right. The actual story is very much embedded narrative, except for the beginning. So you play as a race of people called Harthians, which is an alien species. They run a backwards version of NASA. And you are the newest astronaut in the space program. And so the beginning sequence is you talking to the villagers, getting ready to lift off. And once you lift off, there are a few other Harthian astronauts throughout the solar system that have found a few things. But for the most part, you're finding everything for the first time. And then there's a much older race called the Nomai, which were, of course, they were more advanced. And they left a bunch of ruins. They came for reasons. They died for other reasons. And all of this is you're encountering their ruins and their text, and you're translating it, and you're using it to find clues about not just the story, but secret places. Where should you go next to, find the next clue you're going to need?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Nomai also have a lot of the story is like through interactive set pieces. So the Nomai left behind a lot of technology that you can learn how to interact with. And some of it's important for like getting further in the story, but some of it's just because we had this idea that we thought was fun.
There are a few things that are just, you're like, why is this here?
We put like a disproportionate amount of effort into it because we're like, oh, this is cool. Like players are going to enjoy this.
They're there for narrative. They explain some words. Like if you're the kind of player who's like, wait, but how did the Nomai do this? We'll probably have put a reason in.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There are often things you can play with as well.
Yeah, we try to make all of the the big moments where you learn clues to be, like a model you can play with that teaches you the bigger version elsewhere. Kind of like the model ship at the beginning of the game that teaches you how to fly the big ship.
Okay. So when it comes to world building, what was your process for that? Did you find yourself kind of fleshing out alien races and different planets as you built them, or did that come later?
This game had, I don't know how unusual of an approach it is, but it had a particular approach in that because it started as a student project and we sort of just had to make a lot of stuff very quickly.
Yeah.
I remember one day, I still hadn't figured out what the planets were going to be. I just pulled up a whiteboard and just started scribbling the craziest stuff I could think of. And then at the end just circled 6 of them, and those turned into the planets we have now to varying degrees. Obviously a bunch of iteration, feedback from people, more ideas got put in, and the art has changed completely. But because that was sort of the jumping off point, then we started to work through. We knew what where the 4 main mysteries were going to go, in terms of where the final answer for each one would be located.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But we didn't actually know in detail what each one was going to be, so we almost had to work backwards in a lot of cases to fit the story into this physical environment we had created, and then it sort of became a back and forth as we went on. Okay. And then our writer Kelsey had the ridiculous task of trying to help us. We start making the cultures and trying to make each culture consistent, and sort of it became a jigsaw puzzle, right? And there were a few pieces that didn't have a place until the very end, and we're like, oh my god, there it is.
Well, what does this mean to you guys and the rest of your small team to finally be able to reveal this gameplay and have players really start to give you feedback on what they see?
It's fantastic. It's surreal. It's been so long.
Right.
I don't know. It's amazing to be able to actually show it to people and talk about it.
Yeah, the joke on our team is that we are stuck in a time loop because we were developing the game in secret for so long.
Right.
So it's very exciting to actually be able to show it to people and talk about it. And everyone who's sat down and played the game is just super excited about it. So we're glad that they share our enthusiasm for space and exploration and learning things because you're curious.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, the dream here is that people play the game, and at least in a few people, as a result, are I want to learn more about space and physics or just the world around us.
Just
cheesy, it sounds cheesy, but it's true. We just want people to be curious.
I was going to say, indulge your curiosity.
Yeah, because also let's go to Europa and see what's under the ice. Let's stop this stupid I don't know. It's a small thing, but if it helps, that'd be amazing.
Very cool. Well, Outer Wilds will be out. Do you have a release window picked out yet, or just this is a reveal? So
yeah, 2018.
2018. Very cool.
Yeah, so this year for sure.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for coming by to talk to us, guys. I really enjoyed the conversation. Looking forward to seeing more of the game, and we will be back with another developer interview very shortly on the Shack News Live E3 show.